Welcome to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice.
Welcome back to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice with me, Stacy Beaulieu-Fawcett. I'm a divorce attorney here in Florida and your host. If you're just joining us, be sure to go back and listen to part 1 with Jamie Bassos from Bassos Consulting, where we talked about what makes these cases different. So we're talking about planning and building a parenting plan and how to handle a case with a neurodiverse child. And Jamie is an expert in that arena. Again, go back and listen to part 1 because I don't want to spend a lot of time reintroducing her. But today we're going to dive in a little bit further about maybe some practical advice and parenting plans and things that Jamie helps many families with neurodiverse children. Jamie, let's talk to the mom or dad driving in the car right now thinking, oh, this is my life. What are the first 3 things they should do if they're considering a divorce and they have a child that's on the spectrum or other differences?
Start documenting everything. So you want daily logs of any triggers, any environmental changes, any new behaviors that are happening. What are the child's current routines? So what schedule are they on? What's working? What's not working? All the therapy appointments, IEP meetings, medication logs, all of those things should start documenting those pieces. And then the second thing would be to gather all of your educational and clinical records. So the past history of that individual child, what they've done in terms of therapeutic support, what schools they've attended, any IEPs or 504 plans, progress reports, medical records, previous functional behavioral assessments or behavior plans. All of that is going to be really important as you're looking at, what you're going to be doing for the future. And then just maintain consistency. Do as much as you can to keep things consistent for that child. Change in the life of a child with autism is pretty disruptive. We all like routine and structure, but typically they don't understand what's happening. They don't know what's going on. Their receptive language is significantly delayed. Their expressive language is delayed. They're not able to tell you how they're feeling or really understand why all of these things are happening and what's going on. So the best thing you can do for your child is try to keep things consistent and stick to your schedules, stick to, your sleep routine, your food routine, as much as you can, right? Without, disrupting the whole family unit.
Right, which is so hard because everything is changing, right? You're going through a divorce, you're facing divorce. Maybe one parent is moving out and to think, oh, let's keep everything the same while everything is changing is so hard. So what I heard was number 1, log everything that's going on, changes in behavior, changes at school, changes, any changes, anything going on, log, keeping records. And is gathering those records that already exist, whether it's school records, any prior, maybe psychoeducational evaluations, prior psych evaluations, prior behavioral assessments, prior anything, therapy notes, gathering all of that information, because like you said before, data, right?
Yes.
Then keeping everything consistent, which to me is the hardest part. So hard because everything is changing. So great advice, Jamie, for those 3 things. What are some signs for a parent to know that they might need an expert like you on their legal team?
Yeah, and this is such a critical question because I do think that parents and legal teams tend to wait too long to bring in an expert. If you have somebody on your team already who knows your child in this way, you have a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst that you're already working with, you have a psychologist, you have a teacher, a special education teacher who knows your child, bring them in early on, or hiring somebody outside to come in and do these evaluations and get to know your child and really paint a clear picture. There's some clear red flags that tell me that you need somebody on the case, and it's, critical to come in and provide that analysis. And it's usually when the parents are disputing the diagnosis itself. So one parent believes the child does need the therapy, does have autism, and the other parent is they're fine, they're going to be okay, they don't need this level of support.
They're going to grow out of it. So often a parent will come in, will do an initial meeting with them. We call it a case assessment, where we're really getting an overview and assessment of their case, what's going on, what the dynamics are. And they will say to me, my husband or wife is in complete denial about our child's diagnosis and just keeps saying he or she will grow out of it.
Yep.
So
yeah, so that would be the first. The other one I would consider is when behaviors are different across houses. So you're seeing differences in challenging behavior, either spike or decrease across homes. And it's not that one parent is the better parent, right? They're both great parents trying to do their best, but they're not doing great in one house, the child. And so we need to figure out, why is it falling apart here and why is it not falling apart here, and bringing in somebody to do that evaluation and say, here's why, right? Because during that assessment process, we're able to understand and get to the bottom of the function of the behavior. So why is it happening? And environmental factors play a huge role in that. And the parent might not even know what they are or are not doing to support those behaviors.
Right. Okay. So that would be another flag to say, okay, we need somebody else on our team.
Yeah, that, and also I would say too, just high conflict cases where it's just, that's usually a clear indicator when emotions are already running high. You've got parents who, they just can't get through that conflict. So somebody who can come in as a neutral and provide objectively, what does this child need and how can I best support them without, we're not looking at who's the better parent. We're looking at, here's the data and here's the behavior and here's what the child needs, without caring who wins, right? It's really what's going to be the best for this child's development.
And in my experience, and to your point, bringing the expert in earlier, before the litigation gets really emotional and hot, is a lot easier than bringing you in later. Because if we're going to have both parents on the same page of, we need this person to come in and help us with this, then we need them to be still somewhat amicable in that situation. We can always do it without the other side's approval. There are ways through court that we do that. But to me, if both people are on the same page and they want this evaluation, both are going to be more open and receptive to the results of your functional behavioral assessment than if we're, heading into trial and the litigation is very heated at that point.
Absolutely.
So I think advice to the listeners from my perspective, and what I do tell clients quite often, is the very earliest that we can possibly bring an expert on board, the better off we will be. Because a lot of times, like we were saying before, that helps us get more focused on settlement than focused on litigation. So the earlier, the better. I think that's the same for you, Jamie, as it is for my forensic accountants. The earlier we can bring in our forensic accountants, the better off we are, because that gets down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on sooner than later. And every day that goes by, the more these people are spending on litigation, and the more ingrained sometimes they get in their positions.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you make a really good point there too, just the money piece to all of this. Like, if you bring in the expert early on, you're spending less money down the road on additional therapies, especially for that child, right? So if you know early on, here's what they need. Early intervention is always my biggest push for all things, right? The earlier you get in, the better off you're going to be, because you're getting that support up front before it can spiral sometimes out of control. And then you're dealing with all the back end stuff that you're then having to pay for.
Yes.
So.
What about, I think there are so many attorneys who, the attorney themselves, do not have anywhere near of an understanding of special needs or autism, which I think is a huge problem, because you're dealing with families who have these needs. And if you don't understand it, how are you best protecting and drafting these parenting plans to best deal with that? But what advice do you have for that parent who believes that they do need an expert on board, but they need to approach their attorney about it, and they don't know that their attorney really understands this that well. Do you have any advice for them as to how they should go about talking to their attorney about this, or to approach the attorney about it?
Yeah, I mean, again, really, really good question. And I think it's, the parents are going to be their child's best advocate, and they know their child the best. They are the expert in their child. So really understanding what their child's needs are, and how having somebody come in and explain that in a way that's going to make sense to all parties, especially not coming from the parent, is going to be a pretty good approach, because you want somebody to come in and really paint a picture to the court and to the attorneys that, this is what my child's needs are from an outsider's perspective, from a behavioral expert perspective. My child has a diagnosis, and they've been receiving these services, and this is the progress they've made, right? Because they're coming with all of their data showing all of their history. And this is why we need this person to come in and provide these recommendations so that my child can continue on this positive path forward. That's one example, right? It could be an example where the child is regressing, and you have a situation where you're like my one family that I had in the beginning from episode 1, where we had a huge spike in challenging behaviors and dangerous behaviors, self-injurious behaviors, aggression, and the parents just could not see even themselves why it was happening. So having that person come in, again, from the outsider's perspective and taking a look at just the big picture, and really able to define and narrow down, here are the reasons, here's what this child needs moving forward, and to explain it in a way that makes sense to the court. It's important.
And even to the parents, because a lot of times parents don't understand it.
Right.
I mean, we get, and I have a lot of experience in this area because I have 2 children on the spectrum. So this is probably why I was so excited to talk to you, just knowing this topic is near and dear to me. But we get psychoeducational evaluations, right? And we look at them as parents, and obviously I have a little bit more experience understanding them because I deal with them in court. But I think, look at these, and I try to look at it sometimes from an outsider, right? To say, okay, if I didn't have all this experience dealing with this in my cases, and I'm just a parent and I'm just looking at this report, does this make any sense to me? And I think that 90% of the parents who read it have no idea what they're reading. They don't know what to do with it. Some of them are 40 pages long. So if they can even make it to the end of it before, just their eyes going cross, I don't think it's fair to expect them to understand it. So I love that about you, that you're able to break it down in layman's terms, both for the parents and for the court and for the attorneys in a lot of cases, because we run into that. Like I said, the attorneys don't have a clue. They don't understand this at all whatsoever. And there's a big difference in dealing with a divorce with a special needs child and not. Just such a huge, huge difference.
Yes.
There's just so much more that I want to talk to you about. And I know that we're on a limited amount of time, but I wanted to ask you if you can recall a case or tell us about a case where everyone assumed, and you touched on it a little bit, I think, in episode 1, but everyone assumed that one parent was the problem. But then when you dove in and you looked at the data, that the story changed. Can you share a case with us where that was the issue?
Yeah, and this happens in cases of non-divorced families, right? You have parents blaming each other all the time for their children's behavior. So this comes up everywhere. And I can think of one case in particular, again, like how I fell in love with this work were these handful of families that I was working with going through these really high conflict divorce situations. And, mom's being labeled as rigid and controlling, and it's causing anxiety in the child, and dad's more relaxed and child friendly, and you have differences across homes, because when the child is at mom's house and she's following the behavior plan, she's sticking to the schedule, she's doing the routines, And the child is like, no, I don't want to do that. So engaging in all these challenging behaviors. And then she goes to dad's house and dad's more relaxed. Oh, you want to watch, 45 minutes of YouTube? Go ahead, no problem. And then, when he says, oh, it's time to turn it off, and child has a tantrum, dad's like, oh, don't worry, just keep watching, no problem. So you have these big discrepancies in outbursts across these homes. But when you look at what's actually happening is every time the girl went back to mom's house, she would engage in this behavior, and it's called an extinction burst in our field as behavior analysts, where you engage in the behavior more severely, more significantly, like just over time. It gets worse and worse and worse before it gets better. Because when she was at dad's house, she was receiving all of this reinforcement for engaging in problem behavior. But at mom's house, she wasn't, and mom was following the plan. So it's not that, again, the parents aren't bad parents. They're just parenting the way that they're parenting. But if mom is following the behavior plan and following through on the structure and the environment that child needs to thrive and actually do the things she needs to do to function in her daily life, she's engaging in these challenging behaviors, and so we're seeing those challenges happen. So if both parents were on the same page with following the behavior plan, following through on the schedule, we would see consistency across the homes, and we would definitely see a reduction in challenging behavior across the homes.
Yes. Interesting how it can show up in one place, and we assume that that must be the place that the problem is happening, but yet it really comes down to the consistency across both homes is what I think I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. So the recommendation is just parent training and consistency across the two households for both parents.
Good. I love that. And that's what you do.
Yes.
Parenting plans. We have to craft a parenting plan in every case that involves children. Ultimately, there's a parenting plan. And I know we're running out of time, but what are some of the parenting plan mistakes you see for these kids who have significant behavioral needs?
Yep, great question. So the default in Florida is 50-50, right? So this is super challenging when you're considering the child's transition tolerance. So looking at how many transitions and how much dysregulation that's causing in the child's behavior is a big one of the most common mistakes that I see. So looking at, can we reduce the number of transitions that are happening? Can we increase the warnings for those transitions? Can we introduce any behavioral modification plans or, environmental changes to help with those transitions? So that's a big one. Different rules, routines, and expectations in each home. So keeping those consistent for the child is going to be important. And, coordinating therapy schedules is another big one. So is the child able to access therapy across both homes? Another one is not planning for holiday breaks that disrupt routine. So you're already talking about another additional transition layered into holiday breaks and additional transitions needed there. And then really looking at how, again, mistake, like failure to specify how behavioral incidents will be communicated. So when something does happen, how are we informing the other party and making sure that it's all communicated to everyone on the team and it's not kept a secret or it's not just blown, pushed under the rug? That's really important, is that communication piece.
Right. And, those are all easy things to cover in a parenting plan. And it sounds like, and not just sounds like, but I do see it frequently where the parenting plans just don't have the detail that they need in them when we're dealing with a special needs child. And that detail becomes so much more critical. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you too. So that's awesome. That is wonderful. I know that we are out of time and I just have so many more questions. So maybe someday we can have you back on and we can pick this up because there's so much more that I want to ask you, but let's end with, if you can give one piece of advice directly to a parent who is sitting there worried about their child and divorce, what would you say?
I would say behavior is communication. So your child is trying to tell you something. It's not manipulation. It's not evidence of bad parenting. They are communicating, and it's our job as the adults to figure out what that is and make sure everybody in their life understands and can help continue to support them, especially during this challenging time.
I love that. Behavior is communication. And it's so true when you sit and you just think about that. It's true for adults too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
so true, but so much more for these little ones. Where can people find you, Jamie, if they want to learn more about Bassos Consulting or get connected with your resources?
Sure. My website is bassosconsulting.com. I also have an Instagram. It's just Bassos_consulting. And I'm also on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamie, for sharing your wisdom and your heart with us today. Listeners, if you're listening and you're navigating a divorce with a child who has special needs, you do not have to do this alone. You can find links to Jamie in the show notes. And as always, this information is not legal advice, so please talk to a lawyer about your specific situation. And thank you for tuning in to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice with me, Stacy Beaulieu-Fawcett. To connect with me or my firm, you can head to blgfl.com. Like, subscribe, and review, please.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.